Hi there. We've talked in previous RevOps show episodes about behavioral science in terms of decision-making process and as it relates to sales in numerous capacities. Today, Jess threw a curveball with how we can use behavioral science to drive adoption and utilization within our systems. This episode touches on 5 key behavioral science terms that you should be aware of as you think about driving adoption and utilization so that you can better set your teams up for success. So with that, let's get on into the episode.
Jess,
Doug,
you keep trying to change it up, and it doesn't go away. You keep trying to move our recordings away from Friday, and they keep coming back to Fridays.
We're on Friday morning now. If this was Friday afternoon, we would have gotten to midday, and I would have been like, nah.
This isn't just Friday morning, Jess.
No, it's not. It's not just any Friday morning.
No, this is first thing Friday morning.
It is first thing Friday morning.
This is before Jess has had her coffee Friday morning as we see you.
I've had half a cup, but then I was delivered a better coffee, so that's what I'm drinking now.
Aha.
Yeah.
So we're not violating
We're not violating the rule, no, because as you know, a cup of coffee for me is like a big gulp. So I've had a normal sized cup of coffee for most folks because I've had a half a cup.
But you only have one.
I only have one. I have a big coffee in the morning, and then I'm good for the day.
I mean, it's 120 ounces, but you only have
right.
one.
Exactly. Yeah. When you do that, you only have to have one.
Do you drink right from the coffee pot? The Mr. Coffee pot?
Well, I don't have a Mr. Coffee pot, so no, I don't.
Is Mr. Coffee still a thing?
I think so.
Quiz question.
I think so.
Who was Mr. Coffee?
I don't know. That one, I don't know.
Who was the commercial for? He was the person who did the commercials for Mr. Coffee.
I don't know. I'm too young.
Know?
I'm too young, Doug. Too young.
Do you know who the great clipper is? Joe DiMaggio.
Oh, okay.
Do you know who Joe DiMaggio is?
I do know who Joe DiMaggio is.
Because I was going to say, if you don't know who Joe DiMaggio is, your dad, like that would make your dad.
It's very sad. Very sad.
That would bring shame to your dad if you didn't.
It would. It would.
I mean, I'm sure he hated the Yankees.
I don't know if he hated the Yankees.
Okay, then he.
I don't know. We've never talked about that.
Given given your dad's generation, if being a Reds fan
and his love for the Reds, his undying love for the Reds, yeah.
And yeah, that's right. You did have great, but also just in general.
Yeah, I'll ask him. I don't know.
I mean,
we've never talked about it.
I mean, so Jess, you're a big Broadway person, right?
I am.
Greatest musical in history. Name it. And by the way, it's so clear and distinct. There's barely, I don't even know that there's a second place. That's how clear and distinct the greatest musical of all time is.
What do you think the greatest musical of all time is?
There's no think. This is fact.
Okay, what in your
Damn
mind
Yankees.
is... Okay, yeah, Damn Yankees is good. I don't know that it's considered the greatest musical of all time. Just
well, you know what? A lot of people
by
are wrong.
the theater community, just so you know.
I mean, you mean by the theater community, or is it the theatra community? The theatra. What's the theatra?
Oh my god! And this, folks, is why we don't do Fridays.
No, hold on. This is why we don't do Friday mornings. I have a whole different
dynamic on Friday afternoon. Yeah,
a whole different inappropriate, not.
Yep.
Damn Yankees, yeah. You know what? I gotta see the damn great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, so you're like, you just hate the Yankees, like, but you also, I mean, you know where the hate comes from. The hate comes from respect.
Yep, of course.
So, what did Joe DiMaggio do that no one has ever done?
It's too early for this.
And
I don't know.
And here's what you know. It's not dating Marilyn Monroe. Oh, that was good. Come on.
Okay. Wow.
Dating Marilyn Monroe. That's not what he did that was unique. 56 game hitting streak.
I knew it had something to do with hitting. I just didn't know the specific stat.
Well, you clearly were going out on a limb knowing that it had something to do with hitting.
Exactly.
Pretty safe that it didn't have anything to do with pitching.
Right, exactly.
So right there you had a 50-50 chance of, okay, it was either fielding or hitting.
Yep.
Jess, do you know what happens in, what is it? Like,
in 19 days? No, I don't. That's not where I thought you were going to go. No, I don't know what happens in 19 days. What happens in 19 days?
It's New Year's.
It's March,
New Year's
Doug.
in like 19 days.
It's March. What are you talking about?
Let me make sure I'm giving you the right day. Yeah, today is the 9th, right?
Today's the 8th.
So 20 days. I'm sorry. It's in 20 days.
Okay, what's in 20 days?
So 19 days is New Year's Eve.
What are you talking about?
It's opening day.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's the real New Year's. This December 31st,
God.
January 1 is just kind of this arbitrary.
So do you consider spring training, is that like Christmas? Because that's the lead up to New Year's. Is that?
It's pre-New Year's.
It's pre-New Year's. Okay, great.
Preseason, pre-New Year's.
Yeah. Yep.
Baseball is the sign that life is coming back. The sun is staying out longer. The grass is growing. My backyard may stop being 100% a mud puddle, so that every time my wonderful dog goes outside, she doesn't just bring in tracts of dirt. My Nationals are still going to suck.
Well, at least we're keeping expectations.
Hopefully, they're going to suck less this year.
That's the goal, isn't
it? They got a good group. They got a good group of young players. Hopefully, expecting some of them to break through. So should be I'm hoping it's not a completely depressing season. You should be excited.
Why should I be excited?
Well, you'll get to wear your sweatshirt when it's 98 degrees outside, because for some reason you wear sweatshirts when it's 98 degrees. Right?
Texas.
You get to see. This is what I was deprived of. This and you know that I'm still salty. This is.
Oh, it's going to be the parade. We're going to talk about the parade.
No, we had a parade.
Okay.
But we didn't get to have a real season as the defending champions.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yep.
Right. So you get to. So this year is your defending champion year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the Reds should be pretty good this year.
The Reds should be pretty good. Yep.
The Reds have a solid shot at being a playoff team this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
which
lots
means
for me to look forward to.
Which means they're going to sell off everything and go back to sucking within the
100%.
18 to 24 months.
All right, Doug.
You know what? Hold on. I need to say this because you know what the last 2 years of the Cincinnati Reds have demonstrated to me.
What have they demonstrated to you?
Just how uniquely funny Joey Votto is. I really hope he gets signed. But he is. I mean, he's Dennis Miller type funny.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Dennis Miller before Dennis Miller went crazy. He's funny sometimes at a level that no one even understands what the hell he's saying.
Yep.
But once you translate it, you realize, wait, that was freaking funny. He is sarcastic as hell.
Yep.
He's Canadian.
He's great. I did not know that. No.
I didn't know there were sarcastic Canadians. Did you know that?
I'm not going to go off on tangents of all of the Canadian comedians that are sarcastic that are going through my head right now. I'm not going to do it.
You know what? That's fair. I mean, Canada does create some great comedians. No question about that. You know what's interesting about Canada?
Yep.
On a per capita basis, it's one of the wettest countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, what's its most famous export? Canada Dry.
But I'm bummed. And on that note, today's topic, Doug.
We have a topic today?
We do have a topic. Believe it or not. I'm going to try to bring some focus back here.
Focus, son. Focus.
What I want to talk today about is how you can use behavioral science to drive adoption and utilization within your system. I was looking through our behavioral science concepts, and a couple of them really stuck out to me. And this is something I'm dealing with in a couple of places currently. So I thought it was an interesting topic. So I want to hit on really 5 key behavioral science topics.
So I started looking at your the heuristics that you want to talk about, and so I was, thinking, okay, how does this apply to sales? How does this apply? And then you threw out at me, oh, it's about adopting process and systems and things like that. I'm like, oh wow, curveball right there. But you know what? I should have expected that. You know why? It's baseball season.
Baseball season. There it is. Full circle. The first concept I want to talk about is honesty, which is funny because it's one that we actually talk to clients about with how we work, both for implementations and ongoing. And we talk about how all progress begins with honesty, and the fact that we're going to be totally honest with them and they've got to be totally honest with us. And if that's not happening, and I would say in particular for implementations, that's where things start to go off the rails. That's where things fail.
So I saw that and I was giving this some thought, and here was the first thought that came to me as I started really thinking about honesty.
Honesty is such a lonely word.
I mean, if you can bring Billy Joel into the conversation, you have to.
You have to.
I think you feel it in implementation because that's where you are, but I actually think it's even more important once shit starts hitting the fan. So, I mean, it's critical all the way through. But honesty, as a matter of fact, if you listen to the lyric before he goes running honesty, I had to cue it up right for honesty. It's
right.
But if you search for truthfulness, you might just as well be blind.
Right.
Which is a fascinating lyric. But we use this topic source of truth.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have to accept is that I'm going to get very meta on you for a moment, Jess. There is no truth.
Right.
Right. There's only perception. Right. And it goes back to, I mean, we don't have confirmation bias on here, but far too often we're looking at things for confirmation. And look, I have the feeling, I have, we're a little bit behind our sales target. I mean, it has a lot to do with our lazy sales team, but that'll be a focus for another episode. And as we're going over the scoreboard, I felt the push to, rationalize it, et cetera. So the thing is, this shit is hard. You know what? I'm wearing this shirt today, right? Embrace the suck.
Yep.
Right. And I don't know, maybe it's your fault that I actually, I posted this on LinkedIn last night. I said, why is it no longer enough just to be excited? Because if you look at everything, I'm super excited to share.
Oh, yeah.
Right. This is a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can now edit properties in the CRM. Game changer. And so when there's probably no group of people that have been trained to be more cynical, and in its own weird way, on an industry based on trust, on a discipline based on trust, that have become more distrustful than your sales organization.
Yeah.
Right. And so this whole idea of, I don't know, am I allowed to say this on the podcast? Don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining.
Yeah. 100%.
Right. And so that's where, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want, there's a human concept of equity. It's one of the most important things that drives human behavior. You see this in reciprocity, which we'll actually, I think, talk about on one of the heuristics a little bit potentially. And so it's like, we're doing this for you.
Yeah.
You might be doing it for, like, I get that there's a benefit, but again, don't piss on my back. Tell me it's running, be open, be honest. There's a trade-off. This is, hey, we are going to drive up sales 25%. There's going to be no change to you. What? Huh?
Yeah.
You know what? I saw this when small businesses sell, right? The announcement is always, we're super excited, because remember, you can't be excited. We're super excited to become a part of, and for our customers, this represents no change.
Yeah.
Right. Like all those things. And so there are these little things and all that stuff comes together. And so when you're not clear, when you don't provide a balanced perspective, then you're setting up false expectations. And then, if you're hiding, then I hide. And
so it's natural when you're rolling out new process, when you're rolling out a new system, to want to have that excitement and that rah-rah. And so you want to kind of look at everything with rose-colored glasses. You want to sugarcoat certain things, and those little things start adding up, and it bites you in the ass every time when something goes off, when something's off.
Well, there's something else, because I do want to broaden this today, because I think that's true 18 months after you've launched.
I'm not
Okay.
just saying at launch. I'm saying in general, like.
So I am going to cut this back. I am going to connect this back to a sales issue, right? Because this is something that I realized, God, it's probably 25 years ago. It's sometimes hard for me even to remember that I'm 25 years old, let alone that I had this realization 25 years ago. Maybe even more than that. Now that I'm actually realizing how old I am. So when you're making a really important decision that involves a meaningful amount of money and risk and concern, right? Things could go wrong. As you're making the decision, how do you feel?
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're uncomfortable. It's like your stomach hurts. You got heartburn, right?
Yeah.
And what are salespeople taught to do at that point of making a decision, right? We do a benefit summary. Jess, you're going to love it. Jess, this is going to solve this, this, and this. Right. Right. And so we talk about the fact that trust is so important to influence. Right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is all happening beneath the surface. It's not necessarily known and conscious, but at the moment in time. So think about this. You go to the doctor, you find out there's a 60% blockage in one of your arteries. Mm-hmm. We're going to need to do bypass surgery. Right. And the doctor goes, but Jess, let me tell you what. First off, we're going to give you some amazing anesthesia. I mean, this shit is prime. And you're just, you're going to get full, you're going to love it, right? You're going to be able to, they go, okay, just we understand, here's, right. It's called empathy. It's called connecting. And so at this moment of uncomfort and distrust, we think the way to connect is we're super excited. This is a game changer. It's like, hey, look, we get it. We understand. Right. Yep. There are going to be bumps. Yep. That actually builds faith and confidence.
Yeah. I was actually just having a conversation earlier this week. We have a big data migration, and I was told by our client, hey, I'm really nervous. I'm really nervous. I think this is harder than you guys think it's going to be. And I was like, look, here's the good news. Like, we know it's a mess. It's going to be hard. Like, I'm with you. And by the way, you should be nervous. Like, and so.
Well, my favorite line, they go, I'm worried that something's going to go wrong. And my favorite line is always, I wouldn't worry. Something is going to go wrong.
Exactly. And actually, you pointed something out that I thought was really, I'm gonna insightful, as on honesty, which is the perception of honesty versus real honesty. Like you pointed
Yeah.
out the importance of that.
Of course, I pointed that out when I thought we were talking about sales. So it's a little bit more direct there. You know, one of the things that the unfortunate thing about honesty is the issue isn't really how honest are you, it's how honest are you perceived to be. And, you know, the more you know about something, the more doubt you have. So you hedge your statements a lot, and you're doing that in you know, the intent is to be honest.
Yep.
But it comes across as a lack of confidence, and confidence and honesty are highly connected in terms of how in terms of perception. And so, like, one of the big mistakes that I see is there's a tendency for people to talk in lists, right? Or we go super micro, you know, and things like, and it's like, well, so we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do. It's like, well, no, you've got to, you know, be clear, and this is why you got to know what you're gonna say. You have, you know, so there is an element. There is a performance element to honesty, but again, the problem is there's a performance element, but that doesn't mean it's performative.
Right. Yep.
And that's where we screw up, because, you know, there's a fine line. You know, the doctor communicates to you that there's an X% chance you will die during surgery. Right?
Yeah.
What they're demonstrating in these highly disruptive cases is, look, we understand where things can go wrong.
Yep.
Here's how we're going to handle that.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And so, you know, gaslighting is performative. And the trouble is gaslighting is easy. And the other trouble is, in the short term, gaslighting pays off. Right.
Yep.
What we do, we talk about resistance, and we just defer the resistance further and further and further down. We don't make the people do the hard work. We aren't open and clear with them. We're not making that clear connection. We're not sharing a balanced, equitable view. And again, in the short term, sometimes it looks like, hey, that's making things easier. We're back into the difference between speed and velocity. Honesty slows you down.
Yep.
But it shortens the path.
All right, let's talk about the next concept, which is habit. So I want to get your take on how do you build habits into your process? How do you promote habits with your team?
I always find giving them a new title is the best way to promote.
We're going to be super literal on Friday. Okay.
You build routines. It's part of why you don't train on features, train on motions. Like, we get asked all the time, hey, and it's funny because they even call it sales training sometimes, and what they mean is CRM training. I don't believe in CRM training.
Yep.
I believe in sales training, and so if the CRM is not connected to what am I doing, so like, how can you set it up so that, you know, I think an overlooked item in an implementation, as an example, is what is the default opening screen. And I think that there's a tendency that whatever the default, like, if you do pay attention to a default opening screen, it's one default opening screen for everybody. I think different roles should probably have different opening screens. What starts my day?
Yep. So one thing that, as I was looking into this, that came up was, which is I think what you're talking about, a cue that triggers the action. So something that triggers that next step, that triggers the behavior. And the place that I thought about was, like, what's the screen we're taking them to? how are we taking the user where we want them to action what they want to action to build those habits, instead of asking them to take that first step. So what can we do to kind of guide them with that first step?
Well, you're cheating there, Jess. I'm sorry, we cannot accept that answer. We cannot
Why
accept
not?
that observation, because you are actually using a heuristic that we're going to be talking about later. Because what you actually just described was a nudge.
Which is nudge. Okay.
Right? By the way, what's the opening screen? That's a nudge.
Yeah.
Again, so understand one thing. Whoever you're working with, they already have habits. So understand part of system design, understand their habits. How can we play into their habits, right? How do we make it, when we want to change your habit, how do we make it easier for you to do what we want you to do? How do we make it harder for you to do what we don't want you to do, right?
Yep.
Those are also, so like nudges and habits really kind of connect with each other.
Yep.
The other thing is, Jess, I want to be honest with you. See what I did there?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good way, everybody, just to say, I'm not being honest. When it took me 2 times to read Atomic Habits to appreciate it. I think the first time I stopped listening to it after a third to half of the book, because I was like, okay, boy, this is just the same thing everyone said about habits forever.
Yeah.
And then I kept hearing people talk about it and people that I respect, and I'm like, okay, I'll give it another shot. And for whatever reason, I must have I just wasn't in the right place the first time I listened to it. Because the thing that's powerful, I think, about what James Clear does is it's not so much the habit side of it, though it's absolutely good stuff on habits. Mm-hmm. It's the atomic aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the idea, I think this is the term that he used, habit stacking. And this is why you relaunch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is why you're always launching, right? Because this is why the launch is the start line, not the finish line.
Right.
Because if you think of it as the implementation, you try to fix everything all at one time. And I'll go back, it's New Year's in 20 days. And when I was coaching baseball, one of the things I always talked about is you can always tell the difference between someone who actually knows the game and a parent.
Right.
That was a little... Anyway, so like if you go and watch kids baseball, you'll hear all kinds of yelling. Keep your head in, keep your elbow up. By the way, that's bad advice. Keeping your head in is good advice. Elbow up, not so much. What people who don't know the game do is they diagnose top down, and they also they also say things like, "Keep your head in, your hands back, and your elbow up." What?
Yeah.
What someone who knows the game, what someone who knows hitting does is they diagnose from the bottom up, from the feet up, right? And if I'm working on your feet or your weight, I'm working on your feet and your weight. I'm not working on your hands. I'm not saying, okay, let's work on your feet and your weight. Oh wait, no, bring your hands back, because you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
But once I get my feet and my weight in the right place, by the way, that's the foundation. That fixes a whole lot of things. And we also don't know, the moment you change your feet and your weight, your hands automatically move.
Right.
So I don't know what to do with your hands on, right? You've heard me do sales coaching and call coaching. I spend an insane amount of time on the first 60 to 120 seconds of the conversation, because so much is set there. We've all the action happens at the end.
We've spent a whole coaching call on it. I mean, we have.
And not even finished it. Finished, right? Right?
Yeah.
And that's because if we can get, I get a lot of things. I see a lot of things that people struggle with, or here's an example of a problem that they're having.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be arrogant. I don't have that problem. And I don't mean I don't have that problem. I don't experience that problem. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because what I do in the beginning, that's where the difference is, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm stacking the habit. I'm looking at, and this is why I think about complete as a horizontal motion. Let's get this right. Then let's stack that. Then let's stack that. Then let's stack that. We have this tendency to want to look at it and say, we look at it vertically.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. And and that actually involves 8 different behaviors, habits, etc. And I think that,
Well, and
that's where you just can't get it.
the challenge there too to keep in mind, and I think this goes into implementations, I think this goes into process, and I think it also feeds into sales, is once you've addressed that first thing, that foundational thing, you're naturally going to start to notice 5 other things that need to be addressed. You've got to fight that urge to do all those things. You need to build the next one and then the next one, because I know when we're 90 to 120 days in with a client, and again, this goes to implementation or our ongoing services, they start to see all these things, and I have to remind them, no, we're doing this now so we can build on, because you can't address everything.
That's a great point. The thing that's hard about zone 2 focus, that 90 days to 1 year, as you're going, so as you're finishing your 90-day cycle, the performance zone,
Mm-hmm.
you're about to launch, ship, if you want to call it. And the thing is, in that period of time, you've picked up everything that's needed for the next 90 days to 1 year. So you're launching to use something that's incomplete. You're even launching something that's quote wrong, unquote, right? And so you see that. And of course, you're worried about everything that comes with, now we're going to go live. Okay, what's going to happen, et cetera. Yeah, that's a really interesting element. And so what we do, the other thing that we do is we implement enhancements halfway.
Yeah.
And now I can't adopt that because it's not actually, because it's not full. That's what less is more is.
Yep.
Yeah. So think about it from like, how do we build this habit?
Yep.
How do we stack that? And
All right, I'm going to change the order on you because you actually called out that they're connected. So I want to talk about nudge next. And so again, as I was researching,
nudge from the Yiddish term nudge. I
have no idea.
Well, it's not from the Yiddish term, but they're kind of the same things. A nudge is someone who's like, hey Jess, when are you going to get that?
Okay.
When are you get that?
Funny. So one thing that got called out is nudges are not mandates, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I agree. And they, what it talked about was putting fruit at eye level is a nudge to get you to eat healthy. The place where I actually saw this in action was I took my kids to Disney on Ice. And I don't know if anybody's ever been to Disney on Ice, but what they do is they don't put things at the parent eye level. They put everything at the kids' eye level. So the kids can see and grab and basically complain until they wear their parents down to buy them the $40 light up spinny thing.
Well, if you go to a grocery store, you'll see things at kids' eye level and things at parents' eye level.
Oh, yeah.
See right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. If you put the fruit at the beginning of the buffet line instead of the end of the buffet line. Now, so there's an interesting thing about nudges from a behavioral standpoint is there's disagreement as to whether or not nudges actually have sustained differences once you account for, but the reality is it doesn't matter. And here's how I would look at a nudge. Okay. A nudge is a way to initiate.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Right. So one of the things about Disney on Ice,
mm-hmm.
You know what that makes me think of, Jess?
What?
Dole Whip.
48 hours, I will have a Dole Whip in my hands.
If Disney on Ice were there every day and you went there every week, it would be much less effective.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So if you think about the nudge as the way to initiate a habit. So like a nudge, I'm going to put my shoes next to my bed because I want to get up tomorrow morning and work out.
Yep. Yep.
Right. It makes the thing you want to do a little easier and the thing you don't want to do a little harder.
Yeah.
I know somebody who told the story. They're actually a marathon runner now, but they really didn't like working out initially, that the way they finally did it is they went to bed and slept in their workout gear.
Oh, wow.
So when they woke up, they were already wearing their
dressed.
workout gear.
They didn't have that barrier to have to go work out with their gear on.
It was two things, actually. What they said was it was the, okay, when I did, and by the way, never decide what you want for lunch when you're at lunch.
Yeah.
Decide what you want for lunch before you're at lunch, right? Never go shopping when you're hungry. Well, so they made the decision last night, right?
Yeah.
Which is actually an easier decision because they don't have to pay the price last night. And the moment they make the decision, they don't have to pay the price, right? So they made it easier for them to follow that decision. They also made it harder not to follow the decision because this is what the person said. So I woke up, I'm wearing my workout gear. And now if I don't work out, I feel like a fool.
Yeah.
Why the hell if I'm not going to work out, why did I go to sleep? So they kind of almost built a cost for not doing.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, this is what we talk about with friction. Friction is a nudge, right? The most famous nudge is 401k contributions. Is it opt in or opt out?
Yeah.
The participation in 401ks is significantly higher. Right. This, by the way, is why connecting your email to your CRM and getting both send and receive emails is a nudge, because now, okay, wait, all that stuff is in there.
Right.
In a lot of cases, it's easier for me to find the conversation in the CRM than in my email.
Yeah.
Because when I'm at Jess's record, I've got all my Jess emails. They're all there. When I'm in my inbox, they're all intermixed. So all those things are nudges. How do we, it's like the way I would describe a nudge is just how do we make it a little bit easier to do the thing we want you to do? And by the way, the reason I think nudges aren't mandates, because a mandate is a mandate.
Yep.
Have you ever told your kids, if you're 3 hours into a 4-hour trip and they're fighting with each other, and you say, if you two don't calm down right now, I am turning this car around and we're going home?
I don't know that I've ever said that, but sure.
Right. You don't want to say that, right?
Right.
Because you say that, it's like, the moment you say it, you're like, oh my God, I wish I hadn't said that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've at some time threatened your kids to behave.
Yeah.
With something that you're like.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
If you don't do that, you're going to be grounded for the next month. You're not, and you're like, no, I don't want to do that because.
So I actually did this at Disney World. I threatened to leave the park, and we did, and I was very regretful that was my threat, because I had to follow through on it.
and look, if you don't keep the CRM up to date, you don't get paid commissions.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, other than the fact that that's probably illegal, if you say it, you better do it.
Right.
Because if you're going to throw a mandate at me, one of the things I'm going to do
is test it.
Yeah, I'm going to resist it. Because So what nudges do is, we talked about reciprocity and equity.
Yep.
What nudges do is they keep my agency.
Yep.
Right. I don't have to have the fruit. It's just easier to grab some fruit.
Well, and so like the thing I found fascinating, and I think we've talked about both of these things previously, but humans are lazy. So what a nudge actually does is it feeds into our tendency for inaction. Like we'll always default to inaction. We're going to default to path of least resistance. That's one. And I also think it goes to don't make me think. Like,
well, it is don't make me think, because normally I would take no issue with the statement that humans are lazy. But I do want to be a little bit more specific, because it actually gets to the point we're making here. It's not that humans are lazy. It's that humans' brains are lazy.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what's actually lazy.
Yeah.
Right. And what's funny is we will do 10 times the work to avoid thinking.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll do 10 times the work. We'll do 10 hours of work to avoid a half hour of hard. And the half hour of hard, I still think about, I had a hard day. Oh my God, I'm exhausted. Right. And we do that. And I go, well, what about the person out there that's, carrying rebar,
Yeah.
Moving, 40-pound concrete pallets and we can physically tax ourselves
Yeah.
more easily than we can mentally tax ourselves. And what nudging does is it reduces the mental taxation. You know why Steve Jobs only had black turtlenecks?
Because he didn't want to have to think about what he was going to wear.
Didn't want to make a choice.
Yeah.
It wasn't didn't want to think about, didn't want to make a choice.
Yeah.
Obama only had, well, except for the tan suit, he wore that one day, but basically wore one suit. Right? You saw what happened. He wore a tan suit one day and holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that like we think about it, I fell into a habit. So I get up much earlier than my wife does.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started, figuring out what I was going to wear the next day, and, I'd put it on so I could just, grab it. And then she was out of town. So and I'm like, it doesn't matter. I don't have to do that. It was a pain in the ass, Jess. So I now, whether she's home or not, I grab what I'm wearing tomorrow and put it on top of my dresser. I don't have to.
It was the same thing with my parents, and my dad worked, and my mom stayed at home, and she used to put his suits together, and we would make fun of him when he would travel because she'd put everything together for him, and we would joke and say, "Mom's granimaling are outfits that won't." She's granimaling Dad's clothes, and it's so he didn't have to think about that when he got up. It was one less thing to exert his energy on.
Look, I'm so grateful for the world today because apparently color matching is no longer a thing. But when I was a kid, I'd wear some like bright orange shirt with red socks, or red shorts and my mom would like, you can't do that, and I'm like, well, you know what? You better put a tag on something. I wasn't colorblind per se, but like, I can't make that choice. That's not where. So granimals, those are nudges.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about herd behavior. So this one, I was actually probably most familiar with this one reviewing it.
Lemmings.
What I wanted to ask you about is, so buy-in has become so, I know you do, has become so important for our clients. Like I feel like this is the buzzword of the year. How do you think that's impacted by or impacts herd behavior? Why?
Because people are scared.
Oh,
it's a hard environment.
Yeah.
Because what buy-in is?
What?
Buy-in is an excuse not to do something.
Okay, fair. Yeah. I'm living that with in a couple of places currently. Yeah.
I mean, so candidly, one of the things you have to do is this gets into why you stack.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't buy in something that you're not doing. And so what we're getting here is, it's the fear. It's worse than the fear of being wrong. It's the fear of not being right.
Yeah.
And oh no. So I think one of the things you have to do, and so this goes back to honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important. That's why we got to set the ground rules early. This becomes more of an issue as something stretches out.
Yep.
Right. Because what's happening is, like, if you don't keep something in a tight, we talked about, keeping projects short.
Yep.
Well, the longer they go, the more they build their own inertia. Remember, systems fight to protect themselves. So the longer something goes, the longer the system wants to go.
Right.
Right. Yep. So what is herd behavior? Herd behavior is, if I do what everyone else is doing, then, I might be foolish, but no one will notice. And here's the thing, right? If I'm in the middle,
mm-hmm.
and remember that we're biologically programmed for this. If I'm in the middle, I'm safer.
Yep.
I'm physically safer because the woolly mammoths will have to eat whatever number of people are between me and the woolly mammoth. So that's why the middle is safe. The middle was physically the safe place to be. We are still physical. We operate in ideas, but we still operate. We act in the world of ideas and concepts, but we still, our operating system is still very physical. There's actually this idea, I don't know if it's called the rule of three, but there's this really goofy-ish video of, some band was playing, some like Grateful Dead type band was playing in a park, lots of people. And there's this one guy that's just dancing. I don't know what drugs he had, but he's just dancing like he's had a number of them. And everyone's looking at him and it's like bizarre. And I think it takes like 2 minutes before a second person gets up and starts doing something. And then it takes another like minute or minute and a half and a third person gets up and starts dancing. And then within seconds, 4 people get up, 10 people, and like all of a sudden then everybody's up. And so it's kind of like once 3 people are doing something, I'm no longer going to look foolish. Yeah. By the way, they've done some studies to show, like, they've done simple math problems. Have groups of 4, so they ask what's 5 plus 5, and the first 3 people who are all playing say 8. Yeah. And the fourth person like looks weird, goes and puts down 8 and gives the answer of 8.
Yeah, because everybody else did.
Right, because like I know it's 10.
Right.
It's got to be 10, but they all just said it's 8, and so to say 10 is scary. Yep. Now that's where the idea of piloting and having an initial launch group, etc., can definitely help. But what I think what I think it's really about is more how do we make it safe to move forward. Yep. And sometimes I like that. Sometimes that means, okay, let's bring the focus in a little bit tighter.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Last one I want to talk about is incentives. And a couple of things I found interesting is it talked about incentives that can actually backfire or frequently backfire, which are monetary incentives, performance incentives, mandate incentives. So like, I think the one that's for me that's attached to monetary and mandate that you talked about is the commission use case, right? Use the if you don't use the CRM, you're not getting your commission.
Yeah, mandates are more, at least I think of them more as disincentives, which is an incentive. Right. Monetary is get paid. Right. Commissions you get.
Yeah. And what it all boils down to is those types of incentives, people don't feel like they're doing this for themselves. So they fight against it, really. And I thought that was interesting because that's an approach I've seen a lot where there are mandates, there are monetary incentives or disincentives tied to using the CRM, and those don't seem to work. So what's your thought on incentives, and what are the right incentives to kind of drive folks to use to adopt a new process, to adopt a new system?
I mean, so the first problem is if you think you know what the incentive is, you're fooling yourself. Because incentives are it's a complex ecosystem. Like, right. If I offer to pay you X, and I think that's the incentive. I mean, it is an incentive, but there's 100 other things. So I think that 99% of people in the world want to get up and they want to do something. They want to do something good. They want to feel like they're winning. I think people want to do a good job. I mean, the best incentive you can do is to create clarity around the achievement and the outcome, so that people are pulling in the right direction. The biggest incentive is what's the score. Now, we think sometimes the score is the incentive, but it's all the other things behind it. Do we act in accordance with the incentive? I think, all this comes down to some form of gamification. And once you introduce a game, what you have to understand is that, I mean, first off, this goes back to honesty. If you don't behave in accordance with, then what you're doing is you're delivering highly conflicting incentives. But I know, company X provides an incentive to us. So in September, actually probably more in October, they announced that whoever does the most of this in Q4 wins a ping pong table. And I go, why the fuck are you incentivizing people for what they did over the last 3 or 6 months?
Right.
Because whatever I do this quarter is going to be because, right. And so I look at that and I go, this is a bullshit game and I don't play the game. And if you don't play the game, you're like, if you bring an incentive or you're gamifying something and I don't want to play it, and somebody doesn't want to play the game, you're going to get a negative response. So I think where the biggest incentive is what's the structure, and then what's the right incentive? That's such a hard question. I don't think there is a right or wrong incentive. I think there's a mix. I think it's really dependent upon what the situation is. But people don't do things for the incentive. It's the why behind the incentive that I think is actually what drives it.
One question on maybe something that you could tie back to incentives that you talked about when we were talking about habits is understanding people's habits. So my thought on that is you should take a look at what the habits are today and try to build an incentive around what those habits are, or at least paying attention to them as you're building out what your incentives are.
So if I build incentives, if I build that, but I don't have the structure that aligns and supports that, then I've got cross incentives.
Okay. Yeah. I gotcha.
Right. Like, we want you to increase average deal size. And then we say, why's your closing rate down?
Right. Yep. Yep.
We say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Why'd you send a proposal to that guy?
Yeah.
We also need to know that, too much of anything. I mean, the biggest thing that I say the most common thing that I say to sales organizations that surprises them is when I talk to them about a closing rate being too high. How can my closing rate be too high? All right. That's where we're talking about the structure.
Okay. Cool.
Actually, a client that we're working with right now, one of their objectives is to grow their average client size.
Yep.
And they're very proud of their success of their close rate. And I said, look, if you're looking to materially change your average deal size, by the way, you can afford to, you should, but you're going to have to expect, if you do anything other than expect that your close rate is going to go down. So here we have, so let's say we incentivize you to increase your deal size, but we still post closing rate as the key metric. I've got a conflicting incentive.
Yep.
And the thing about money as the incentive is money is an extrinsic motivator.
Yep. Intrinsic
motivators are always gonna, that's where you're gonna get the authentic performance. When I'm driven by extrinsic incentives and they're not fully in alignment with my intrinsic incentives, I either don't play or I cheat.
Yep.
And all you have to do is look at what happened at Wells Fargo to understand what I mean by I cheat.
Yep. All right, I got
Speaking of which, you have an incentive to end this episode.
I do have an incentive to end this episode. I do. A couple of key takeaways. So all progress begins with honesty. It's just as much about how you deliver the message as what the message is when we're talking about these concepts. I really like that idea of stacking habits, and I think that feeds into a lot of things outside of just habits. And then build the incentive around the achievement and the outcome. Make sure that you're aligned when you're talking about those things.
Jess, I'll leave you with this question. What do habits and pancakes have in common?
I don't know.
They're both better when you stack them.
Oh, God.
Just say no to shitty RevOps, Jess.
Till next time.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. As a quick recap, honesty, habit, herd behavior, incentives, and nudge are all concepts that can affect your system adoption and utilization. How are you applying this knowledge to your organization? Let us know. If you're looking for more information on behavioral science, we do have a blog post that goes into the 7 cognitive biases that influence buyer behavior and decision making, and a few other podcast episodes that you can find in this episode's show notes. And speaking of this episode, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a rating, and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug and Jess about behavioral science, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on X @DemandCreator or LinkedIn @LiftEnablement. And until next time, just say no to shitty RevOps.